Hi everyone, JB here. Welcome to the podcast once again. I'm very excited because I'm speaking to someone who I've known for 11 years now. It's the CEO of Exercise New Zealand, Richard Beddie. Thanks for joining us today, Richard.
Great to be here, JP.
Now, before I kind of get onto our conversation, everyone knows you're the CEO of Exercise New Zealand, but you also have a bit of an international flavor to you in the sense that you sit on international boards. Can you just tell me what they are and what is your role in that?
Sure. So I'll start, I think, chronologically backwards. So the first one I was involved with was ICREPs, which is the International Federation of the Register of Exercise Professionals, which is basically the international collaboration body that works with all of the national registers around the world. And so New Zealand, Australia, UK were the first three to form. Let's get together and chat and see how we can support each other. Now there are 15 different countries involved. And really what that organisation is all about is, again, that collaboration between the national registers. So the national register is really where the work happens and we facilitate collaboration. My role, I've been on the board for a while. I was also chair for a while. My title now is Board's Chief of Staff, which is probably a lot fancier than it actually is. There's an executive director who does most of the work. I just help facilitate stuff because I happen to have a bit of organisational knowledge. So I'm never one for titles, but that just happens to be what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, it is about that organisation. I'm really passionate about because I always think the work happens at the coalface. It's the people, the exercise professionals actually doing the work. That's not what I do in my day job, so I'm very passionate about supporting those people. So that's number one. Number two would be what was formerly IHRSA. So most people would recognise the name IHRSA, now called Health and Fitness Association. They renamed last year. Just announced that the event, which was also called IHRSA, is now the Health and Fitness show. So again, that'll be next year in Vegas. But I'm on the board of that, and so that's a very substantial organisation, multi-million-dollar organisation based in the US. It has a global presence. It has a global board, and I've been on that board for just coming up to 2 years now. And the reason I got involved was I was involved in a group called the Global Health and Fitness Alliance, and all it was a bunch of people who, through COVID, got together and said, we all got screwed by governments over COVID. Now, different pockets of success, but they were all very micro stuff where, and I don't really want to talk about the pandemic times too much because it's not because there's not something to learn, but I think we're all over talking about that. But there was really clear that we needed to do something more about it. We haven't got the cut through that we should have got. And so we instigated some global research, which is now called the Deloitte's report, which is the only global research on the financial cost of physical inactivity. And there are 20 individual national reports and a global report. We certainly use that a lot in New Zealand to advocate to governments. But that GHFA got me involved with the, now I'll say IHRSA, now HFA board. And I'm really interested in global research. It's a new piece of global research going to come out in about 2 weeks, actually. So
That sounds really exciting and interesting to not only to just be involved in, but just from my point of view, just to see, the results of that. And as Billy Connolly would say, that makes you also very windswept and interesting that you've been involved in so much cool international stuff. Some of that I didn't know about you, so that's really good. Now you're in Christchurch, New Zealand. Have you always been in Christchurch, New Zealand, by the way?
Pretty much. So I was born in Christchurch, and my dad was in the army for 20 years and certainly for all of my childhood. So we moved through military bases throughout New Zealand. I thought that was kind of normal as a kid. So I've been through a few primary schools. Once I got to secondary school, though, I was back in Christchurch. So for most of my life, I've certainly lived in Christchurch. I'm fortunate I get to travel a lot. So I always sort of go, I get the best of both worlds. I get to live in an awesome country like New Zealand, and I get to see the world. And I realize you can slice and dice that however you like. You can actually live in multiple countries if you want. I've actually never lived outside New Zealand, but someone asked me the other day in the US, they said, oh, how many states have you been to? And I counted them. I think I've been to 35 of the states.
Whoa.
Including a whole bunch of different colors these days, because, we know with the recent election, let's not talk about that one. So the world was surprised, let's just say. But it's, so not only North America, but globally, much for work but also for pleasure. And so, again, I realize that is a great privilege to be able to do that. And so that's my joy of being able to live in a wonderful country like New Zealand and travel the world.
That's amazing. And like you talked about, moving around at different schools. And one of the things that we share was this kind of quirky bit of information that I found out purely because I did the Exercise New Zealand roadshow with you, and we were on the road together for 10 days, doing 8 different cities, right? And in amongst that, you get asked questions by the people from the industry about, your background and your work and all the rest of it. And we're on a panel, and you said, oh, well, I was the fat kid at school. And I'm looking down the panel thinking, oh my God, he's the CEO of Exercise New Zealand, and he's the fat kid at school. I'm an educator, international educator in exercise, and I was the fat kid at school. So like, just tell me what that was like for you, but also how do you go from that to being so involved? You went from that to, at some point, owning gyms. So what was the progression? How does that all happen? And what was your experience?
So, if I go right back, it was almost probably happened by accident, but now that I'm involved with it, it's my passion. So it's really interesting. And many people have a version of that. Once they discover it, oh my God, this is amazing. It's how you discover it though, right? And some people's story is very interesting. Some people's very deeply personal around so-and-so got a disease and I got involved in that and I discovered this and now I'm so passionate that the evangelist. That wasn't my story. I describe myself as a fat kid at school back in the day when there was a fat kid, or maybe 1 or 2 fat kids. I think, in no disrespect, I'm using that term about me. I'm not describing other people, but there were probably 2 or 3 people who were overweight in my year, a school of, say 700, 800, so 100 or so per year. A couple of them were noticeably overweight, me being one, maybe 10, 15 kilograms overweight, but noticeable. And I was in an all-boys school in Christchurch, which meant that everyone played rugby, because all men play rugby, because that's what a man should do. And I say that with a little bit of sarcasm in my voice, because I don't think that's true, but that's what we were told. And so I didn't want to play rugby because I wasn't very good at sport, and I'm not a physical person, and it reinforces it because you're not very good at it. You shouldn't probably be playing it, and because you're not playing it, you're not going to be very good at it. And to reinforce it because you should win, because rugby is about winning, as most sports are. And again, I'm telling you what I was told, not what I believe here. And then it got to the point where I remember getting a note from my mum that I did not have to play rugby. You can imagine that back in what would have been the late 80s.
In New Zealand.
In New Zealand, getting a note from your mum, you didn't have to play rugby. It's like, whoa, I was that kid. And so, there was a punishment. So the punishment is every Wednesday, instead of doing rugby practice, you run around the block 10 times. Because you got to be active, and it was really. And there were other kids doing that too. I don't think they had notes from their mum, but there was a reason why they did. But it was definitely sort of, well, if you don't play rugby, we'll just punish you by running you around the block. And so for me, I regarded exercise as something you want to avoid, right? Because exercise is a punishment. And that's why I think, there's a whole bunch of psychology for children, and I'm certainly not an expert in children and movement, and particularly physical activity and sport, but I do know don't use exercise as a punishment, because as soon as you do that, it's like the idea of giving away chocolate as a reward. I get it, you might do it. It now reinforces probably a message that you don't really want to make it about, because we all struggle with, why do I always want to eat chocolate later? Or maybe it's because in childhood I always use that as that's my good food. And it's like, because I'm good, I eat chocolate. Anyway, I'm not an expert in that space, but I can see it gets inside your head. So I moved on from, being, as I say, not only, to me, it was less around my weight and more around the fact I was inactive. I did not want to do activity. I was forced to do a little bit, but I chose to therefore push against that. I wanted to not do it. And it wasn't until first year university that I remember a friend of mine, she wanted to go to what was called the gym, and she wanted to do aerobics, and it was in the morning, and she goes, can you give me a lift? Because she didn't have a vehicle. I had a motorbike, so I'd just give her a lift. And I remember quite often she wouldn't be ready, and I'd get there about 6 because the class is 6:30. I'd knock on a window because she hadn't got out of bed yet, and she'd come to the front door. She'd have a gym bag ready. She'd jump on the back of the motorbike and off we'd go. The main reason I went is because I needed to give her a lift. I felt if I didn't go, she wouldn't have gone, and I'd agreed that I'd go with her. And so I didn't think much of it other than, oh, yeah, sure. I wasn't really going to the gym in my view because I was doing this thing called, and it wasn't group exercise, it was aerobics. Again, I know it's just a word, but that's what I thought of it. We jumped around a bit and I wasn't very good at it. And then eventually I started to like, this seems pretty cool. I could probably get paid to do this. So I became an instructor. There's probably a little bit of a journey in there, but it's pretty basic in that I'm already doing it. It wasn't until many years later that she said, oh, she was always really embarrassed to stand next to me because I wasn't very coordinated. It's like, you tell me that now? So that was a few years afterwards, but apparently I got coordinated enough to become an instructor.
Yeah.
And that's where I got my interest in the industry. So I was still going to university. I was instructing then at some point, I think about 5 or 6 different gyms in Christchurch. And I really enjoyed that because it enabled me. This is when what was called, own choreography. So it wasn't a choreographed program. I was making my own choreography and then effectively going to a gym and saying, hey, I've got this class. I can teach it. I can teach a set class or a pump class or whatever it was at the time. And that's got me interested. And then when I was 23, I'd literally been out of the university for a year. I only had one job ever outside this industry, which is selling photocopiers for Xerox. And then the gym, one of the gyms I was working at was for sale. Really wasn't on the market, but we knew it was for sale. So me and a business partner at the time decided to buy it. And I had no idea how to run a gym other than I thought I could run it better. In the same way that I had no idea how to run a restaurant, but I've eaten at a lot of them and I can tell you how I think I should run a restaurant. So that was literally what I knew. I knew a little bit about the product. I know about group exercise. I knew nothing about the gym floor. This is back in the days where I remember we put in cardio gear and we put in 2 treadmills and 2 bikes, and we now have a cardio section. And that was a big change because that was a new thing that was going to be put in. Now, again, I don't want to spend too much time about back in my day, but it was very interesting that the things that we now take for granted. Although the thing that I can continually remind people of is when people talk about these amazing new products and they go, oh, you mean circuit. There are so many products now that I would notionally call circuit. And again, a very polished version of circuit, don't get me wrong. There are some really amazing, good stuff that often people would now call small group training or group training. But actually circuit was around back in the 80s. In fact, even before then, you had gym, you had circuit, you had group X or aerobics. So yeah, that's sort of how I got into it. But it was very much sort of a accidental initially. Then I kind of started to enjoy it, and then it's like I think I can. The only thing I knew about the gym is I think I can do this better. Not that it was done particularly badly, but I thought I've got some ideas that I'd like to try because I reckon if you do this right, this could be better. And that's kind of where I got involved in the owning a gym at 23 with the idea how to run one.
You've got gym ownership, but then there's still like a lot of people work in gyms or have studios, but they don't go, do you know what, I'd like to be involved in the leadership of this industry, like nationally. So show
yeah, sure,
explain to me the transition then from owning gyms to then having a leadership role nationally in an organization that basically runs the industry in NZ now.
Sure. So I can be very upfront. That was never the plan. So I never had a plan to do that. It wasn't sort of I'll own a gym and one day I'll be involved in something beyond that. I was thinking, hey, I'm very passionate about teaching classes. I love teaching classes. Owning your own gym would be a really cool way of taking to the next level. Back then there weren't really chains, and so owning your own gym was the ultimate, at least in terms of the ability to deliver to more people. So I remember one year I went to what was a NetFit conference up in Auckland, and there was this at lunchtime on one of the days. There was this, I think it was called Fitness New Zealand then, and there was a group of people. Which it's like, what's that? It's like, oh, that's kind of like the gym owners group. Oh, yeah, well, I own a gym, so I probably should go to that. And I remember I asked them questions just because I didn't understand something. So I said, oh, what about that? What about that? And then about sort of 45 minutes later, they were electing the committee. And they said, who wants to put their hands up? No, maybe a few people put their hands up, but I remember someone saying, well, what about that guy over there, the guy that was asking the questions? And so I ended up getting on the committee. I think it was year 1. It might have been the second time I went, but I do remember literally sort of being, voluntold that maybe I should be on the committee. It's like, yeah, sure. What's the committee do? And so that was very much sort of year 1 of being involved with the association. Sort of probably 2 or 3 years later, I went back to university doing my MBA, and that's when I got very interested in going, what if we did some research on this space, actually looking at the association, Exercise New Zealand, we'd renamed by then. What do we actually deliver? Why do we deliver it? And how can we get the best impact and benefits to the industry that the industry want? Because no one had ever asked the question, what do you actually want? So there's always been well, if we do this and you do that, it kind of might work and people might like it. But actually, how about we do a bit more research? And so because I was doing a master's degree at university, we could put a bit of academic rigor behind it. So we did a bunch of processes, won't bore you with it, but we did a bunch of focus groups and surveying and what have you through Exercise New Zealand, but as part of my studies. And funny enough, out of that, Reps New Zealand was born. Because one of the things I discovered when I looked at, for example, Australia, is they had this thing called a registration body where you'd register as a personal trainer, you had to meet a standard. And it's like, whoa, what a radical idea. Because in New Zealand, I remember going around talking to people, well, some people have 3 days of training and some people have 3 years of training. Some people have no training, some people have big arms. There was still that kind of idea that if you're a bodybuilder, you must know how to build your body, therefore you can tell other people how to build their body, which kind of works if you're 20 and you're male and they're 20 and they're male, and there's nothing else into this mix, right? And you go, well, we now know there's so much more than that. I always say, what's personal about your personal training? Because it's not just about the person, but it's about what is personal about it. What are you personalizing for them, for their goal, for their individuality, for their life, all that stuff. So that's how I got involved with what was, Exercise New Zealand. And then when we did that research, a whole bunch of stuff came out. One of them was having a register, and we did a national tour around New Zealand. I think we visited something like 200 gyms, which at the time would have been a good, probably almost half of the industry. And we spoke to staff. I remember having meetings with groups of 3 people and groups of at Les Mills, Auckland, there were more than 100 people in a room. We said, we're thinking of having this idea called a register. It would mean that there'd be a standard and you could apply to join it based on that. And of course, everyone wants to talk about the standards, but I always go, do you get the idea of the question first? The idea of having a standard. Forget about what the standard might be. Because if you agree with that, then we can talk about the standard. If you don't agree with that, let's not have it. But generally supported, that was launched. I then got involved. I think at the time, our chief executive resigned. This is probably 20 plus years ago now. And I said, oh, look, I'll do it for free for a while. I ended up doing that, I think, for 3 or 4 years. I still had my gym, so I'm paid by my gym. I don't need to be paid by you guys. You don't have a lot of money anyway. I think at one point our annual turnover was $6,000 a year. So, you don't get to do a lot with $6,000 a year. And so, but it grew, and it grew because I think what we were doing was listening to what people wanted and delivering. And whether it be they wanted something like a wage survey, well, okay, we can run a wage survey. We'll keep it confidential. We'll use our auditors so that they're the ones that take the name off the top and separate it so no one knows. But this is before SurveyMonkey. So how do you keep things confidential? Literally, we'd send the auditors and they'd cut the name off the top and then they'd send them back in a separate envelope. That we invented that system, by the way, whereas now you'd say, well, you do it through SurveyMonkey and you anonymize the data. But anyway, so that is how I got involved from gym owner to eventually sort of effectively was the committee of Exercise New Zealand, and then eventually later on they appointed me as a CEO, initially volunteering and then growing. And then now, we've got to the point where we've now got 10 staff and we are sustainable as an entity. I always think, to me, what's really important is one day I won't be here. And it's important the organisation continues beyond me. And so when I leave, good, the board can then put a job ad out and a person can apply and that person can get it and they'll be paid a fair market rate value, blah, 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 all that stuff, like any other normal job. It was not always the case. It often was, lots of organisations rely heavily on volunteers or people who give a lot more time than their remuneration, which is absolutely fine. I say, I've done that, but it's just not a sustainable model. So if we're going to make this a sustainable thing, you can't say, well, can you donate? Can you give everything yours for free for us, JP? Well, that's great for a while. Or if you do it for limited people, that's fine. It's same as trainers, trainers who want to help people and they give stuff for free. I go, that is amazing. Please carry on doing it, but just don't give it free to everybody. Or even worse, give it cheap to everybody. That's a whole different conversation. But, I say give 5% of your time for free by all means, but make it 0. And then the rest of your time, charge your market rate. And choose which we're giving, whether it's 5% or 10% or 3%. I don't particularly care. You do your own sort of assessment on what you want to do, particularly if you think your skills are the things that you best can give. For some people, I go, actually, if you're an investment banker, maybe being an investment banker to someone isn't the best skill you can give. Maybe money is. So you should give money to the charity that you love, because actually giving them investment advice is probably not what they need. If you're an exercise professional, maybe someone helping them on their personal journey might be the best gift you could give them. So you decide, is the best way of giving back that? Because I'm a huge one about how do I give back. At times it's literally financial. At times it's, here's my idea, here's my passion, here's my thing I want to share with you. Like I do it regularly still now with conferences, because I am not I am not a professional speaker in that I don't earn my living from that. If I'm presenting at a conference around the world, as long as not out of pocket, I don't mind presenting. Now, I realize not every presenter is that. You make your living from education, JP, so it's a different conversation with you than it is with me. But I'm always if I can give back and help the industry that way, if that is valuable, and it isn't always, but if I can do that for somebody, then I'm always happy to do it.
And that is something I really respect about you, because I know you're speaking to government, quite frequently, and your engagement both, up the chain and down the chain is massively high. Like I think you've got one of the best reps registration for the industry on earth. It's up in the like high 80 percentiles, is that right, in terms of the number of exercise professionals that are registered with you?
Yes, so percent depends on what number you use, but the number we generally use, if we talk about personal trainers particularly, there's probably around 5,000 in New Zealand. The reason I say probably, the problem with statistics when it's gathered at census data, they only ask people their primary job. So a lot of jobs, particularly a group exercise, are almost completely lost because that's not what you do for a living. Personal training is not so affected by that because a lot of people do it as their main occupation. But we estimate around 5,000, and we can look at some Stats New Zealand data as well. But 5,000, we've got around 3,500 of them. So it's around 75%, but that is one of the highest in the world. I'm not aware of any other registration body that's got that high percentage. Most registration bodies are somewhere above 50%, but certainly below that 75%. And again, while to me it's not a competition with other registers, it's a useful benchmark to go, how much of the industry is buying into the idea? Because I often do think, to me, registration is one of the most important tools to enable people like me to have conversations with government. Because part of the problem, and this is probably not what many people think when they work in the industry, is because I'm good at what I do, I upskill, I'm qualified, all those things that are important, and then you put yourself out there and you do it. The problem is when we talk to government or government agencies or even government ministers, they're still going, yeah, but aren't you a bunch of influencers online? People who want, particularly guys who want to take their tops off and go, look at me, listen to me, and buy my thing, often based on not necessarily the right science or even science at all. And you go, yeah, that's not our industry. And you go, well, but those people are saying that. Or here's the secret that the fitness industry doesn't want you to know. As soon as they start like that, it's probably rubbish. So to me, it's important to have a standard in the same way that you say, if I'm talking to an electrician or a plumber or a doctor, I don't need to go, I wonder if they're qualified. I wonder when they got the qualification. I wonder if it's still current. No, because there's a thing called a registration body for them. In their case, it's regulated. So the big difference, of course, you can't practice those things and call yourself that thing without going to that registration body. And if you do, you're breaking the law. In our case, you don't have to. You can call yourself a personal trainer or any of the terms in our industry, and it's not illegal with zero qualifications. Or with my one day, I've done a course, and I want to mention a product, but just in one small element, I've done a push-up course. There you go. That's enough. Well, actually, it's not, but who said? And so that's why I think it's so important for me as a tool that I can use when I'm talking to government about, actually, we do have standards in our industry. And in fact, we have a registration body of which there are, 3,500 people are registered, which means that we can actually attest to the fact they all meet national standards. And if there is a process, if there is anything that goes wrong, there's a way of complaining against those people, against codes of ethics, all that stuff, which you expect to have with any profession. But to me, it's so important as a principle. Now, people that say always want to debate the standards, and I don't think it's going to be particularly useful to have that discussion now, but to know that those standards are developed by the industry. So this is not something that is done to us, it's done by us. And I think it's so important. I think it's the most important thing as an industry we've done in the last 20 years is the development of national registers globally. And I've seen it, literally a few years ago, there were none. Well, when I started into this, there were none other than Australia. And then now, there's 15. I mean, and in all of the major trading partners of New Zealand and Australia, which is fantastic. UK was the third off the third cab off the rank, so to speak. And now, SIMSPA is the organisation in the UK, and incredibly well respected, and they've got government recognition. We've got the same thing in Dubai with the government. It's close to regulation there, which is fantastic.
And I mean, that's something that you've done really well in the sense that it's still voluntary, but you've got that level of engagement and it's voluntary. Like if they're saying, well, I want to be part of this, that means that they see you as representative and they see that there's value for them, not just for you, but value for them in being registered. So, I mean, if we stay on that theme, what does NZ do well, for example? You've got this national conference that you do every November. It's on in a couple of weeks, and I've been lucky enough to be involved 10 times in that conference. But the thing that I take away every time I'm there is it's the friendliest conference. It's the friendliest event on earth that I've attended and spoken at. Why?
Interesting. I think you're right. One of the essential things that is really good about that conference is I'll call it the culture. And culture, when it's good, it's actually really hard to screw up because culture encourages the culture. And if you don't fit in, you leave. But when culture's bad, it's the reverse. Someone good comes along, goes, I don't fit in here, and they leave. From the very beginning, we wanted this to be about bringing the best content together, but realizing that ultimately it was about delivery to the people who attended. And what I noticed from the beginning, we had a couple of people who are, I'll call them out. Bronnie McSweeney, who actually now lives near you, JP. She's, not that it really matters, was born Australian, lived in New Zealand, did a whole bunch of stuff in New Zealand. I was very fortunate and privileged to work with Bronnie in a number of different roles, including she worked actually as a personal trainer and then eventually personal trainer coordinator at one of my gyms, and so has been really instrumental when we started the conference in building that culture. And she was really good. I think we called her the wow coordinator. So her part of her job was to wow people, and whether it was a small gesture or some big stuff, but to actually organize stuff to make sure that people felt comfortable. And particularly for us, that was presenters as well, because presenters are the people that ultimately deliver the content, because it's a bit conferences, I think, are a bit of an unusual beast in that you're actually, in most cases, the organizers are not delivering their own content. They're getting speakers in to deliver the content. And therefore, the very thing that you're selling, which is come along and hear all this great content, is not the thing that you have the expertise in. Like, I know a little bit about stuff, but I don't know all the stuff that every presenter knows. And so therefore, there is no way that we could ever deliver it. And who wants to listen to just me? You go, I can do a workshop. I can't do a conference, not at least personally. And so the same thing with any one person or even group of people. We want to bring the best from everywhere, bring them together, and then deliver it. And that's how do we then make sure that each one of those people, and I'm talking presenters here, feel special, because they are the content that we're ultimately selling. But to make sure that they feel special. And then, of course, if we look after them, then they look after the attendees. It's the same. I've heard Grant Gamble talk about this a lot with team members. You look after the team look after your customer. It's so true, because if you just focus on that end user, to me, it's really important. The end user is who we're all about. But the way that we do that, particularly at the conference, is about looking after the presenters. And I would say for some reason, I think it was intentional, but it was sort of a little bit of it morphed into this. There's an amazing culture between the presenters that I haven't really seen duplicated elsewhere, in that I see regularly presenters attending other presenters' sessions, which does happen at other conferences, but it happens far more at our event that I've seen. Again, this is not, I want to make sure I'm saying this in a way that's positive about our event, as opposed to speaking negatively about anyone else's. I've been to lots of other conferences around the world, and they are fantastic, and I'd be happy to list them all, because there's some pretty awesome ones out there. I'm just talking about what we did, and I think what we did and how it got as good as it got, but it
Mm.
really was around building that culture of the community. And then I remember one year, actually, it was I was going out for dinner with my husband at the time down at the Viaduct after the event. It was on a Sunday night, and we thought, let's go have a nice dinner somewhere. And it was sort of like after event, great. And I walked into a restaurant, and there were, I'm not sure if you were at the table, JP, but there were about 12 presenters all having dinner together. And it turns out that's kind of like the annual thing that they were doing, completely unrelated to us. We weren't organizing this dinner. This was if you like, a presenters dinner that a
Yeah.
bunch of them, and it's grown over the years. And they said, "Oh, do you guys want to sit with us?" And we did. And they're going, "You sure you don't want a quiet dinner?" It's like, no, it's fine. And it was great. It was fantastic. But the culture, that kind of stuff, you can't design it. It morphs and it forms. But if you set the right tone, if you get the right people, and then you support the right kind of engagement, interaction. Some people would say, for example, it's a values-driven thing. I do strongly believe in values. I'm not sure if it's entirely around that, but I do think doing those things right, genuinely being authentic with other people, helps set that tone. And now that's the nature of the conference. And so we can continue to run that. It will attract other presenters. It'll attract other people go, "Oh, I went to that. It was really cool. I got that good vibe." And it's
Mm.
really, not to say it's hard to screw it up, but it's certainly hard to derail it with one thing. One
Yeah.
thing wouldn't derail it anymore. Whereas on year one, or particularly year two, you've got this ability to go, well, hold it, if 4 or 5 of these sessions go a bit funny, or if some of these presenters it just doesn't work, not so much their content, but the way they deliver it, that could potentially affect it in the future. So we spent a lot of time, and people like Bronnie were absolutely fantastic in that. She was, one of those people where just so good at understanding how to make people feel special.
I mean, I remember being picked up at the airport by Bronnie, and absolutely, it was like you were a special kind of superstar, international fly-in that deserved this special treatment, and almost like you'd already won before you even kind of got to your accommodation. You'd already kind of won and were appreciated. It was really great, but I felt that across those early conferences, especially. I really felt that across the board from everyone. I went into friendly rooms who were supportive and wanted to know what you had to share, as opposed to I think we've probably all done those rooms where it's a room full of people that want to be impressed by you or challenge you to impress them. And
Yes,
that's a very different vibe. It's not
it is.
friendly and supportive. So you don't walk in there and relax. You walk in there and go, "Oh God, this is tense," and then 15 minutes in, right, okay, then they're starting to relax now. It's just like that from the get-go, and that's what I loved. So what would you say, what else does New Zealand do well that you think, and this again, what we're doing here, we're staying on the positive. We're not saying that because you do it well that everyone else does it rubbish. What we're saying is, what else do you feel that New Zealand does particularly well?
Well, I think we've done something that many organizations in New Zealand have to do, which is to be very close to their customer, because we don't have a lot of them, because our economy of scale just doesn't exist. So
Mm,
we've got 5 million people. You compare that to Australia, is that 30 million? Is that the right?
yeah, more like, yeah, close to 30, yeah.
Yeah, so it's 1/6 the size, but actually an easier comparison is it's the same as Sydney, except it's spread over the size
Yeah.
the size of well, at least the length of New South Wales, not necessarily the width. So we've got this challenge of way less volume, but but a geographic spread, and not a lot, and therefore to do it, because we still need economy of scale to exist, but we don't have the economy of scale from the customer. In the
Yeah.
same way, if you're a cafe in a small town versus a cafe in a big city. Now, of course, in a big city, you're going to have more competitors, so there are different analogies that you can draw out of that one. But just taking it back to the single, if you're going to have one entity doing what we do, then how do we make sure that we are close enough to our customer to truly understand what they want? And by our customer, that can be, of course, the facilities, the gyms, the exercise facilities of all types, shapes, and forms. I often say gyms, but it's more than gyms these days. All the boutique offerings, or the yoga studios, or the Pilates studios, or the PT studios, which are not actually gyms at all. It's not the word they'd even use, but they offer exercise to the public. And then all the exercise professionals, because they're customers too, whether they're attending a conference, whether they're registering with reps. But they, particularly given that most of them are self-employed these days, means they're running their own independent business, albeit they might be within someone else's. So they might be renting a space somewhere else, but their business is their business. And so what do they need? And that's very different from the gym. And a small gym is very different from a large gym, not just because of the size of the gym floor, but the nature of their operation. Are they part of a franchise? Are they an independent? Independents globally are in the decline, not so much because there's lots less of them. It's just that the explosion of the franchises and other groups have meant proportionally they're far smaller. There's probably about as many as there were in the 90s, just they haven't exploded. There's a lot more of everything else, whether it be I won't mention names, brands, but you think about all the boutique offerings of the kind of high intensity circuit format. There's lots of them now. They're very polished. They're very, the fact that they charge a lot more money than an average gym offering and yet are successful, that's a great thing. As a consumer now, you can choose, in New Zealand, $7 a week. There are gyms there. They're very good, very successful, and there's, I'll say, $70 a week. That's probably where we're talking about 10 times the price range. Just like with a car, I can buy a Toyota, I could buy a Ferrari, and everything in between. So I think, back to your question, it's about getting close to your customer, and we need to do that. And again, we do that in lots of different ways, and we don't always succeed. That's the reality as well. So you've got to acknowledge that we'll try to do that. We may not succeed all the time in doing that perfectly, and we just need to we need to be quick enough to adapt. The one thing that a small organization can always beat a big organization on is speed of change. And we never want to be that big organization. Not that we don't want to be big, but we don't want to be like a big organization. So we can change tomorrow. If we need to have a new requirement for a new thing with reps, we should be able to consult with our industry and then quickly move to the new thing, or have a new category of person. For example, group trainer. It's a new thing. It didn't really exist 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. Is that a different skill set to personal trainer? I think it is. It's not the same as Group X, although there's certainly elements of the Group X kind of motivation component that isn't necessarily sort of the core of a one-on-one motivation at a PT level. But some of the exercise knowledge is very different. And so we should have that. Now, we should be able to turn that around in 12 months, not 5 years like a government agency.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So we've got a few things that New Zealand's doing well there. Is there something that you would love for New Zealand to do better? Is there something that frustrates you?
So yes to the former, do better. I'll say it doesn't frustrate me because I choose to not let it get to frustrate me, but it drives me. And that is the recognition of exercise, I'm going to say, on the health continuum. And I'm pull that from people. We go, what do you mean by that? I think, JP, you probably go, you'll nod and go, I get it. But for people go, what does that mean? What I mean is that we know that exercise fundamentally is one of the best single things you can do for someone's life to improve their health. I'm not going to talk about any other benefit. I'm just talking about improving health, including mental health, but health. So why is it that as a concept, as an idea, I won't even call it a product, is not being given its true recognition in terms of information, in terms of investment, that's money, because it's a prevention tool, but it's also a treatment tool. And again, most people listen to this and go, yeah, I get that. Yeah, yet the government doesn't. And governments in different countries, some of them are beginning to engage, which is good. Funny enough, recently in the last 3 weeks, I've met probably with 6 or 7 different MPs right across political spectrum, about to meet or talk to the Minister of Mental Health in New Zealand. We have the first one ever, and that's going to be next week. And what's really interesting is that there's been a sea change in their perception of our industry for one simple reason, and I don't think no one else has talked about this. The thing that's changed is that they exercise. So when I talk to an MP now, most of them, if they're under 35, and certainly, so if they're under 40, they probably exercise. If they're over 40, they might exercise. What I'm saying is, because it's normal, most people exercise. Do they go to the gym as often as they like? Maybe, maybe not. But they move. They might even not go to the gym. Maybe they play rugby on the weekends. That's fine. It's like, this is all good stuff. We know that the most recent ex-Prime Minister. He's a massive cyclist, but not a competitive cyclist. He cycles everywhere. This is Chris Hipkins. So this is great stuff, right? When it's normal for them to do it, when they have a conversation with a person like me, it's not like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, oh my God, I know for me, when I cycle, I feel better. When I go to the gym, I feel better. Great. I don't need to convince you on a personal level. Now I just need to give you some science about why it works on a population level. And so that has been really beneficial. And the bit that we need to work on, particularly in New Zealand, is getting not just that concept at an individual level, but at a policy level, at a government level. I've got some data that I can share that shows the cost of physical activity, and I can also show the cost of intervention and the savings. And the turnaround and the savings is within 12 months. So I can't think of another health intervention that pays for itself within 12 months. It's unheard. You do things that will reduce cancer rates over the next 20 years, and eventually that will pay for itself. But not in 12 months. This does. Every individual, you save $2,500 per person, but just getting them active. You go $2,500, I could literally pay for a personal trainer to see them. Not quite, but if I said, I'm going to give you $25,000, could you get 10 people active and keep them active for a year? You go, yeah, I think I could. I could literally afford to do a one-on-one session with them every week. Maybe not an hour long. Let's not get too much into the details of what it would look like.
Yeah.
But absolutely, for $25,000, can you keep 10 people active? Or even better, I'll give you $250,000. Can you keep 100 people active? You go, yeah, hell yeah. And again, who are these people and what do they want? I don't know yet. But absolutely, we know exercise professionals could do this because this is what they do every day. It's just a matter of getting that recognized. And so that is my absolute passion right now, is to get, and it will take a while because it's not just government, it's policy officials, it's people working, funny enough, in a industry, the health industry, the most regulated industry in the world. So we talked earlier about reps and registrations being effectively unregulated. Yes, you can choose to, but you don't have to. Actually, that's why it's so important that we do, because health is so hyper regulated. Every single profession that works within health is regulated. Doctors, nurses, cardiologists, radiologists, radiographers. And there's a difference between those last two. And the reality is that each one of them will have a very defined role, and that one will not do into that one. And that one passes that thing over to that one, and that one looks at it, and that one then reports back to the doctor. It's all a system, and it's all, whether it's good or bad, but it's very regulated. And that means when we kind of try to interact with it, and we've got a bunch of people here that want to help. Whoa, hold on, slow down. Who are you helping? Oh, anybody. Whoa, no, that's not how it works here. So whereas you go, within the medical system, oh, you need to see a specialist because you've got a such and such condition, or actually that's outside my realm because I don't do that. So I only do soft tissue because I'm a physio. So you need to go to so-and-so and they'll do a scan for you. And then you'll go back to your GP and he'll send you to a specialist who might eventually send you to a surgeon. But again, I'm not criticizing that system, but it's a well-known system, pretty much the same everywhere in the world, with the sort of exception of America, not because the medical system is different, but their funding is very different. So insurance companies drive a lot of weird behaviors in the US. Whereas I always think, I think it's best to put them to the side, not because necessarily it's a good or a bad system. I probably think actually it's not a great system, but the fact that the system of funding is so fundamentally different. But New Zealand, Australia, UK, most of the Western world and much of the developing world still has the same challenge. They have an unlimited bottomless pit of need and a limited budget to deliver it. And whether your health system's currently here and sort of it's 9 out of 10 and it needs to be 10 out of 10, or currently whether your health system is 3 out of 10 and everyone wants it to be a 6 out of 10, doesn't matter. There's always more than it could do than you could ever possibly deliver. And we are the solution to a lot of that. I don't think the entire solution, because there's lots of problems you need to deal with in the health system. But New Zealand alone, I can save the government $500 million. Now, $500 million to a lot of countries is not a lot, but that is massive compared with the health spend in New Zealand. So the nurses got a pay rise recently, which is a big deal. It was $100 million cost. So in New Zealand, $100 million is a lot. 5 times that every year in savings if we just got people physically active. $2.3 billion lost productivity, not just to the health system, but to the economy on the whole. Tens of thousands of unnecessary deaths. The list goes on. Now, again, people listen to this go, oh, yeah, I get it because exercise is so powerful. Why do I'll say that the health ministers, the health policymakers not drive it? The reason is, in the most part, they don't get what we do because we are providing health benefits. We're not the health industry, and that's something to realize. don't call ourselves health industry, because we're not. We provide health benefits, but we're not health. We're exercise. Exercise actually provides lots of things, including health benefits. And don't forget a whole bunch of stuff that's not health. It's, by the way, it's fine that you lose weight out of this. And I know that losing weight might actually also help you with the health, but if it just makes you look better and you feel better because of it, go for gold. That is still a reason that you might want to exercise. It's not the number one reason anymore. In fact, I think it's like number 10. But the fact that that exists is still fine. I exercise because I like being around other people. You could argue that's a bit of mental health, but even if we don't just say that's why I do it, good on you. I go to the cafe and get a coffee, not because of the coffee, because I like being around other people. Whatever, it doesn't matter. You're still buying the product. In this case, we'll call it exercise rather than coffee. It doesn't matter why you do it. But in our case, if we're talking to health, I'm just focusing on that health benefit, which I still think is the most fundamental reason that people exercise, if you do include mental health and well-being. But again, whatever reason you want to exercise, go for gold and please do it. And if someone else does it for a different reason than you, all power to them. That's still cool. Are you moving? Good. So yeah, I'll get off my bandwagon, my high horse now, and just say that's my current passion. That's where I really want to move it in New Zealand. And I think it applies to much of the world, but particularly New Zealand.
And your passion just shines through in your words. I can feel the drive that behind your words. If you were to have a message for, coaches in the industry, not just in New Zealand, but across the world, like what would it be? Like, I'm fascinated to know, it's just drifted into my mind. Like what would your message be for people that work in our industry? Because it's difficult kind of thing to sum up, whether is it about them? Is it about the service they provide? Is it about their clients? What would your message be?
So I'm going to say two things came to mind. One of which is a more conceptual concept, which is, and then one piece I'm going to give someone advice if you're starting. Okay, so the first one I think is a more conceptual concept, which to me is fundamentally key to why our industry is so awesome, and that is collaboration. And I think focus on that, whatever that might look like for you. If you're in a gym and you've got lots of other trainers and collaborating on whatever programs, offerings, you name it, or I will know more about diet stuff, you know more about exercise, let's do a cooking school. I don't know, I just made that up, right? That kind of stuff, as you go, how can I work together with other people? It doesn't have to be necessarily selling your product together, but collaborating, understanding that so-and-so does bodybuilding, I don't, I do rehab. So why would I not, if someone wants to do bodybuilding, why am I going to do that? I'm going to send them to someone else. That being comfortable to do that. Now, I've used specific examples there about what collaboration is, but collaborate in whatever way that is, helping trainers who are not in your region, working together, because fundamentally our biggest challenge is not enough people are moving. It's not competition. When 99% of the population are moving, let me know, and then I'll say, actually, I've changed my mind. Now it's competition, every man for themselves. But that's not going to happen in the foreseeable future, which is a good thing in the sense that for our industry, it means collaboration is still going to be fundamentally key. But the other thing I would say, and this is very much sort of someone, I'll say, relatively new into an industry, I hear lots of advice around this is the next big thing. And whether that big thing is very niche and specific, or whether that next big thing is more something like, oh, you should do yoga, or you should do high-intensity interval training. You should do insert whatever you like. You shouldn't do treadmills, you should do rowing machines. They're way better for warm-ups. The challenge I have in my mind about that stuff is, while most people are well-meaning when they're giving that advice, not always, because sometimes they're trying to sell a product, but assuming they're just trying to tell you, oh, I've discovered yoga, you should do yoga, is that they're fundamentally forgetting one thing, which is, well, where are you and what do you want? And so the same thing happens with you, and where do you want to go with your clients? Do what you want to do. By all means, listen, did you know that was a thing? And I'm pretty sure everyone knows what yoga is and high-intensity interval training is. But they're quite different in terms of the product. But did that resonate? Do you want to work in rehab? Do you want to work in health conditions? Do you want to work with Parkinson's patients? And you can fundamentally see that they can walk better the next day. Oh my God, that changed my life. Yeah, not my thing. Fine. There is no right or wrong answer there. You go, oh no, you should be excited by this. Well, if it doesn't, don't do it. Do you like groups? Do you like one-on-one? And by the way, the answer to this can change. But don't be led down this idea that there is an answer to this. Because particularly you see it when people are trying to sell a product, is the answer to the diet is this diet. The answer to exercise is this, the new thing. My piece of exercise kit that you have to do, whether it's 8 minutes a day or 8 hours a day, I don't know what the answer is, but this is the thing I'm selling you. And actually there isn't an answer. So find the thing that you I don't even say enjoy, but it just resonates with you. And it's okay if you don't know what it is initially. And by all means, listen to other people. Oh, did you know this is a thing now? Did you know that this is now how people could do stuff? I could do small group training. I could do that as well as personal training. What really excites me, maybe, and I found some of the best people end up going so niche. They'll literally, they don't just deal with postmenopausal mums, they'll deal with postmenopausal single mums who also have multiple children and don't have a car. And you go, what the hell? And you go, the reason is because they're so good at that. They just so understand the needs of that
Yeah.
client. But also, they're helping a very important group, mums, and particularly a group that has these other challenges in their lives. Now, some of that I made up in terms of, it doesn't, it's like left-handed people on a Wednesday stuff, right? It's like whatever your niche group is, really do it well. And the more niche you go, the better you can be at really understanding their need. Still understanding, of course, individuals are individuals, right? There's an individual nuance to everything. But do not be convinced by someone who says this is the answer. The answer to the future is recovery. I think recovery is really important. It's not the only thing. You also need intensity. If you go back 10 years, it was intensity. Well, actually, intensity isn't the only thing either. Maybe it's technology. I love technology. I've got, Aura rings. I use red light therapy at home. I love that stuff. Again, that's just me personally. I'm not endorsing any product. I'm just saying that's what I like. But the idea being that, find the thing that resonates with you, do that, and be prepared to change it.
Very, very cool. I appreciate your views on that. And I guess because we've only got about 2 minutes left, I'll ask you one final question that you can enlighten us on, because I'm interested to know. I love asking a question at the end, which is fairly broad and just seeing where people go. My question is, what do you want for yourself, but also for everyone else? And that can be general, can be non-industry related, or it can be, you can answer from your role. But I'm just interested in, what would your answer be if I just said, like, what do you want for everyone as well as yourself out there in the world? And this is a good moment for me, for everyone listening, by the way, because I don't think I've ever known Richard to not be able to bring to an answer with fast, rapid fire words and things. It was nice to just get you to take a moment there.
So my answer is around something that I wish for everyone else, and it does apply to me as opposed to the other way around. So it's definitely something that I go, I wish for everyone, and by this I mean in a positive way of if I could give this gift to the world, both individually or wave the magic wand and everyone would now have it, is for them to understand the true specialness of who they are and what they are able to contribute to this world, and then to be able to do that authentically. Whatever that is, and that doesn't mean change the world stuff. This is really important, back to my kind of early comment. It doesn't have to be big. It might be big. It might not. And by big, big might be helping one person one day and just literally helping them on their challenging moment. But that gives me such a sense of amazing joy, because that's the thing that I think I've brought to this world for.
Yeah.
It may or may not be your job. It might be. And it's a true pleasure if what you do for your living happens to at all align with what you think you are kind of, I'll call it a calling. I'm not trying to use too much language that might alienate some people. But I think there is whether it's a purpose or there are a series of purposes that you're brought to this world for, find what they are. If I could give that to everybody, or even a snippet of that would be amazing. And then to be able to deliver that in some way to the world. You talk about dopamine hit. There you go. It would be the ultimate sense of reward to be able to actually do that for somebody.
Yeah.
And I want that for myself too. And I'm fortunate. I think I have a degree of that. I'm always looking for more. It's not just about me, but it's how do I help more people, and how does that, and in turn, give me a sense of satisfaction in what I'm doing. But I think if I could wish that and give that to everyone, that would be amazing.
That's a pretty beautiful sentiment. So, Richard, I know you've got to go. So thank you, Richard Beddie, for joining me today and sharing all that fascinating information, but also just to bring your passion and drive to the podcast. It's been great. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.